very narrow. But the 4 chart is how children are using it on a regular basis, at home, ubiquitously. So, what keeps us, teachers, educators, from diving in and doing this? To be in the world of children. Well, let's ask, let's make a quick list of ones that we might have heard before. The cost of the medium, the equipment, trying to keep it up, the inaccessibility of the equipment because someone else is borrowing it, finding and fitting the right media to the class because I can't find the right YouTube to show the right chemistry experiment, not enough time to cover or to plan. These are all things that you've all heard at your school. I'm sure that you've heard these from the people that you're trying to work with to bring along as mentors. You teachers in the audience, I'm assuming, are doing this on a regular basis. It's your job, however, I'm speaking to you about how you are going to bring other teachers along to see the world in your way. I'm assuming the audience all does what we all know is good teaching, but I'm sure you've also been tasked with being a change agent at your school. Am I right? And anybody raise their hand that they've been told they're a change agent at their school? They're all afraid to. They looked at the principal first. So, you represent the small group of teachers who know how to do it. And yet, we talk about the lack of skills and knowledge. We treat this as a new problem. We treat this as a new problem. It's not a new problem. Because they said of motion pictures that I believe motion pictures will revolutionize our educational system in a few years. It will supplant the use of textbooks. Edison said that in 1922. This is not a new problem. So let's talk about what teachers that come to you and say, well, I can't because. What do they tell you? It takes too long. They tell you also, I have to cover the curriculum, IB, O test, A test, you name it, they'll tell you the test they're aiming for. They'll tell you the pacing guide that goes exactly with that test that they're aiming for. Technology's not on the test, therefore I don't have to cover it. Kids are so far ahead of me, it's hopeless. They'll also say, well, we're not one-to-one, therefore we can't. But most importantly, they'll end most of the conversations by reassuring me and saying, well, don't worry, because what I do works. Well, I have just one question. Works for home. So, when you're commensurate with home-based discourses, when you're asking children to do things in ways that they do at home that expand what they do at school, when you're asking them to do that, you ask questions like what they use, where they use it, how often, and why. What are the purposes? When you ask those questions, kids will honestly answer you. They will give you what you want to know. We simply need to ask. And if you're using tests, and if you're using other things to guide your progress about how long you are along the way of doing a good job with IT, if you're using those old indicators, well, I would argue that you're wearing the wrong glasses to see the problem clearly. Beg your pardon, I'm not quite done. Here are requisite knowledge that Lee Schulman, who's from Stanford, had argued for in 1986. Knowledge and reform. Pedagogical content knowledge was in the forefront because we had measured, and continue to measure today, scientists, technology experts, and all kinds of other people about what they know. And something that teachers tend to have that other professionals don't is a mix between what they know about their pedagogy and what they know about the content. And that is tempered by what they know about the children as well. It's how they learn, in Schulman's words, to transform the content into the lives of children. Well, Mishra and Kohler have taken this to the next step and talked about the technological pedagogical content knowledge, or what they call TPAC, and there's a reference if you want to, both in your program and these slides that we shared with you as well. But they're describing what we know about technology and teaching static technology versus teaching it with the content versus connecting it with the lives of children. And in their work, they have reaffirmed what it was that Schulman argued over 25 years ago, which was the transformation requires the preparation of critical interpretations by students, the representations by teachers to create analogies and metaphors that bring other kinds of learning, other kinds of thinking to a static problem. The instructional selections that teachers make that no other expert would are about the variety, are from a vast variety of materials that they use. They don't just choose a curriculum. The requisite knowledge includes this adaptation of these representations to the background of the children that they face. And when we're talking bicultural education, we have a whole mix of children that are in the classroom, no matter what school you're at. And the teacher, with this pedagogical content knowledge, takes these representations and helps the teacher or the children in those contexts, in every single background, to be transformative. Finally, there's some tailoring that occurs for these adaptations to promote some comprehension. The ability to transform is what matters. So, let's do a quick quiz. What does a transformative question look like? Are you ready? Nod your head, please. Which of these four represents a transformative question? You'll note that 1 through 3 already have known answers. Only number 4 has an unknown answer that can be accessed and addressed by children's participation in data collection and analysis and proposing new solutions. Let's try another. But before we do, let's remember that critical interpretation must be a part of the questions that we ask children and the tasks that we ask children to accomplish. A wide variety of materials must be at our disposal to be able to address such questions. We must tailor our adaptations, and we must promote comprehension. So let's try another. Those of you who have been in my workshops, I notice a lot of people have been in my workshops that are here. Thank you for coming back. I'm hoping you're learning something here. We do an experiment specifically about the phones that they carry and how dangerous they might be. So you might recognize these questions. There are known answers to the first 3. But there's not a known answer to the 4th. In fact, it's widely debated. And children will come in thinking that if they sleep with their iPhone under their pillow, they'll get cancer. Because they saw it on CNN. This is transformative, and so one of the tasks we give them is to devise a movie where they demonstrate how you can answer the phone safely. And once we've done that, then we really look at the data from either the National Institute of Health or National Cancer Research Center, and we say, is there really a link? Has that been proven? Over 60% of the data suggests no. How about another? There is but one transformative question up here. I'm still deciding. There are real problems in Singapore that children can be and should be engaged in, and they include these. And along with these are an entire host of real world problems and real content to be taught in ways that can and should be transformative. If you're still asking children questions like the first 3 that have correct answers, then actually you're not asking children to see the world in ways that experts and scientists do. You're doing something entirely different. But that's what challenge-based learning is about. There are lots of examples online. Many of you have attended workshops about challenge-based learning. There are more and more and more examples going online. I strongly suggest that you go to the iTunes U sites for both schools and universities, look up some challenge-based learning examples, because we need to recognize transformation. One of the examples you can go to is ours. I'm not necessarily promoting ours. There are lots better out there, but I had to put mine up there. The teacher's challenge within challenge-based learning is the following. And it's the same now as it was when Schulman wrote those initial words, which were we must achieve standards, high standards of course, without the standardization of the process. We must be careful that the knowledge-based approach does not produce an over-technical image of teaching and a scientific enterprise that has lost its soul. Are students sufficiently involved in the evaluation process? Well, what if we really ask the questions that matter? What if we ask the students, which of your 3 teachers does a great job? Which of your 3 teachers does the worst job? What professional development do you think teachers need to do a better job? What if we ask them, what's the best representation of your knowledge? I challenge you to think, Do we really think students don't have answers to those questions already? They watch us every day. They already have the answers to those questions. We just don't ask them. So I challenge you to ask yourself, as well as those teachers that you're going to go back and meet and mentor and bring along. Do you think you're a leader? If so, where are the student artifacts? What do your parents focus on? Do the children's ideas actually contribute back to the discipline of science or social studies or history? And if they don't, are you really a leader? Because if you think you're leading but nobody is following, it's not for a walk. So, if you look at the two professions, the medical profession and the teaching profession, how far has the medical profession and the teaching profession come along? Actually, quite a long ways. Looking at the tools of modern medicine of the era, looking at the tools of modern education of the era, we can recognize there's been some development. But then we also, if we took these two individuals, the teacher and the medical doctor, and we put them in brand new environments, the 21st century, how would they do? Well, here's an ambulance from the 19th century. What if we took this doctor that practices in this particular ambulance in that ambulance? Would they be able to function? Could they perform? Could they save lives? Could they do their work? Well, let's take the teacher. There's the original environment. There's an American portrayal. How would they do in a new environment? Well, I would argue that the teachers wouldn't panic, their kids would do fine, and the parents wouldn't complain. If you were sick and you had cancer, would you go see the doctor that had been doing the same thing for 50 years? If you're sending your own child to school, would you do the same with teachers? We might ask ourselves, are we committing educational malpractice by not doing that? We need to ask better questions. I posed 3 of those questions today. Are the students' tools commensurate with their home-based discourse? Do students' lives define what is authentic? And are students sufficiently involved in the evaluation process? Because if we tried to go to the moon in the same way that we try to improve schools, we would build a better telescope, and we'd look at the moon, and we'd build a better telescope, and we'd look 10 years later, and we'd say, nope, we're not there yet. And that's not how to improve schools. So we need better questions. Because the tools don't define us, but our teaching does.